how the world's most famous monk got exposed. Millions of people saw him as the world's wisest monk until the internet started digging into his story. What if the calm voice, the monk image, and the life advice empire were built on half-truths nobody questioned for years? Let's get into it. Jay Shetty became one of the biggest names on the internet. He was everywhere. Podcasts, books, award shows, celebrity interviews, motivational videos flooding every social media platform. To millions of people, he wasn't just another influencer. He was the monk, the guy who supposedly walked away from money, status, and modern life to live in India for years searching for peace and wisdom. That story became the foundation of his entire brand. And honestly, people loved it because the internet has always been obsessed with transformation stories. A troubled young man becomes enlightened. A stressed business student turns into a spiritual teacher. A monk returns from India to help the world heal. It sounded like the perfect movie script. And for years, nobody really questioned it. But the bigger Jay Shetty became, the more attention he attracted. And eventually, people started asking uncomfortable questions. Questions about his past. Questions about his education. Questions about whether he was actually a monk at all. And once those questions started spreading online, the cracks began to show. Jay Shetty was born in London to Indian parents. Growing up, he often talked about feeling pressure to become successful. Doctor, lawyer, businessman. That was the expected path. But according to Jay, he struggled to find meaning in life during his younger years. He admitted to partying, chasing thrills, and feeling lost. Then came the moment that supposedly changed everything. In interview after interview, Jay described meeting a monk while studying at business school in London. He said hearing this monk speak completely changed his life. According to his story, that single moment pushed him towards spirituality and eventually inspired him to become a monk himself. It became one of the most repeated parts of his public image. The problem? The details never fully matched up. Sometimes he said he was 18 years old when it happened. Other times he said he was 21. Later reports suggested the timeline pointed closer to 19 or 20. Now look, forgetting small details happens to everyone. But critics felt this wasn't just a random memory. This was the central moment that built his entire identity. People started wondering, if the story was truly life-changing, why did the timeline keep changing? Still, Jay's popularity kept growing. After graduating from business school, he claimed he spent years living as a monk in India. He described meditating for long hours, living simply, and dedicating himself to spiritual growth. And honestly, that image helped separate him from every other motivational speaker online. Because Jay wasn't selling himself as just another entrepreneur. He was selling wisdom, ancient wisdom, monk wisdom, spiritual wisdom. And in the age of stress, anxiety, and burnout, people ate it up. Soon, he started giving talks at companies about mindfulness and mental health. Then came the videos, short motivational clips about relationships, purpose, happiness, and self-discipline. The content exploded online. Before long, major media companies noticed him. The Huffington Post started promoting his videos heavily. Celebrities followed him. Big interview shows invited him on. Suddenly, Jay Shetty wasn't just popular. He was a global brand. He won awards, built a massive podcast, sold millions of books, and gained tens of millions of followers across social media. At this point, he looked untouchable. But behind the scenes, criticism was quietly building. One of the biggest controversies came from accusations of plagiarism. People started comparing some of Jay's quotes and ideas to older works from other authors and creators. Fans noticed similarities online. Some claimed he reposted inspirational ideas without properly crediting the original creators. Others argued his content often sounded deep without actually saying much. Statements like, "We have more knowledge but less wisdom," or "The people around you shape your reality." To supporters, those messages felt inspiring and calming. The monk image was the center of Jay Shetty's entire brand. Every interview reminded people about it. Every introduction mentioned it. Every podcast appearance repeated the same idea. "I lived as a monk in India." That sentence gave him instant credibility because most people assumed someone who gave up normal life for spirituality must have discovered something deeper than everyone else. But eventually, journalists and critics started digging deeper into the story, and that's when things got messy. One investigation claimed there was very little proof that Jay had actually lived the kind of isolated monk lifestyle people imagined. Former members connected to the same spiritual community said his life during those years wasn't exactly what the public picture suggested. According to some reports, he wasn't living in complete silence deep in remote temples the way many fans imagined. There were blog posts, lectures, travel, public appearances. Some critics argued he was presenting a much more dramatic version of his spiritual journey than reality. And then another issue appeared. Old blog posts reportedly suggested he may have spent far less time in India than the 3 years as a monk story people heard repeatedly online. Again, maybe there were explanations. Maybe memories became simplified over time. But the bigger problem wasn't necessarily the exact number of months or years. It was trust. People started asking whether spirituality itself had become part of a marketing strategy, because the monk identity gave Jay something incredibly powerful: authority. The moment someone is introduced as a monk, people automatically assume wisdom, discipline, peace, and honesty. That image protected him from criticism for years. But eventually, another controversy pushed things even further: his coaching certification program. Jay launched an online school teaching people how to become life coaches themselves. The program reportedly cost thousands of dollars, and critics immediately started asking hard questions. Was the course truly accredited? Was Jay properly qualified to teach psychology and coaching? And why did the sales process feel so aggressive? Some former critics described the enrollment process as feeling more like a high-pressure sales funnel than a spiritual education program. At the same time, people began looking into Jay's own educational background. On older websites, his degree was reportedly described as behavioral science. But according to reports, the university he attended did not actually offer that degree. Later discussions suggested his actual studies were connected more to business and management. That discovery created another wave of backlash online, because now critics weren't just questioning his monk story, they were questioning his qualifications entirely. And suddenly, the internet started seeing him differently, not as a spiritual teacher, but as someone who may have blended self-help, spirituality, business marketing, and social media psychology into one giant personal brand, a brand worth millions. Still, here's where the story becomes complicated. Despite all the criticism, millions of people still defend Jay Shetty. And honestly, there's a reason for that, because many people genuinely feel helped by his content. His videos about anxiety, relationships, heartbreak, and self-worth connected deeply with audiences around the world. For some people, his words came at the exact moment they needed encouragement, and that's what makes the entire controversy so uncomfortable. Because even if parts of the image were exaggerated, many fans still feel the message itself helped them. That creates a strange situation. Can someone still inspire people if parts of their story feel misleading? Can advice still help people even if the person giving it isn't fully authentic? The internet still debates those questions today. Eventually, major media outlets directly confronted Jay about the controversies. In interviews, reporters questioned him about the monk image, the lifestyle contradictions, and the criticism surrounding his brand. But many viewers felt his answers never fully addressed the concerns. Instead, they sounded vague, careful, almost rehearsed. And for critics, that only strengthened the idea that the real Jay Shetty was still hidden behind a polished public persona. But maybe the biggest lesson in all of this has nothing to do with Jay Shetty alone. It's about the internet itself, because social media rewards people who can tell the best story. Not always the most accurate story, not always the most qualified person, just the most convincing one. And in a world where millions of people are desperate for meaning, purpose, and guidance, the line between wisdom and marketing becomes very blurry. Jay Shetty understood that better than almost anyone. Whether you see him as a fraud, a misunderstood teacher, or simply a businessman who mastered storytelling, one thing is impossible to deny. He built one of the most successful self-help empires the internet has ever seen. And even after all the controversy, millions of people still believe every word he says.